We're going to continue reflecting on the life and times as well as political career of the late former Deputy President David Mabuza. Let's now welcome Professor Sipho Seepe, who's a political analyst who's joining us now to further talk to us about the passing of the former Deputy President and focusing specifically on his tenure as Deputy President as well as his style of leadership. So Professor Seepe, a great pleasure to have you with us here on SA Today. Let's get your reaction first to the news of the former DP's passing and what you think he will be most remembered for during his political career and the type of legacy and leadership that you think he leaves behind.
Well, let me start by saying, like many of South Africans who are caring, that we extend also our condolences to the family and also to the ANC. And one must also underscore the fact that somebody like Didi Mabuza is not a Johnny come lately. This is somebody who gave his life to the struggle from as early as when he was a student. So you're talking about a student activist, you're talking about a trade unionist who moved through the ranks of the ANC from the very branch level up to the position of the Deputy President. And before he became a Deputy President, you're talking about somebody who you could call the El Supremo of the province of Mpumalanga in terms of the ANC politics. He was quiet but very formidable, and he's a two-term premier of that province. And he also occupied a number of positions, being an MEC for education, MEC for land agriculture, MEC also for road and transport. And that gave me almost a sense of being able to understand how government works. But at the same time, it gave him power. And as you know, those who are in power are also able to dispense patronage. So he was able to use this position also to build the base. And many people have commented that not only did he inherit the base from the previous leaders, but he extended it to such an extent that 2017, when the ANC conference met, the Mpumalanga was second in terms of the number of delegates that were accepted by the ANC. So you're talking about somebody who also built the organization, not only benefiting from it, but the one must underscore the fact that he is not a Johnny come lately. This is a person who had been there. And of course, in the ANC, you also have to master the political terrain of fractions. And Didi was able to find a way of being shrewd in terms of his calculation. And some people also found him to be very opportunistic. And some would also argue that they have said that he was also somebody they consider to be a Judas, because in the politics, especially where you have power politics, there are people who will be excited and some will be disappointed. And Didi always understood that he is also a game changer. And what happened in 2017 was to change the trajectory of what was almost assumed to be a victory that would have gone to Nkosazana Zuma. But the Didi at the last moment changed the course of what was almost a given. So in that sense, you cannot, when you write about him, you have to talk about somebody who was also a game changer.
Absolutely, Professor. I mean, he's been hailed by industry or colleagues alike for his struggle credentials and also being a unifier there, as you've alluded to. So most political parties and colleagues have also reacted to this news. And what resonates with most is how Didi was a humble yet a dominant politician, I suppose, owing to his degree in psychology there, Professor. He was one politician that always seemed to remain very calm in adverse circumstances. What do you expect from his official send-off, and how do you see the nation coming together in bidding him a befitting farewell to the fallen freedom fighter?
I think what is very important, and I think it's already happening, is not only to remember people in terms of how high they rose we must also remember where they come from. We must also remember that these are people who were young and willing to say that South Africa will be free in our lifetime. And I do think that many people, when they think about, and the state, when they think about Didi Mabuza, is also to remind South Africans that we are children of struggle. We are the children of the Mandelas. And we should not erase that history. In the same way that we should also be harsh in our criticism in terms of the betrayal of the hope that was there. And in a sense, this is some of the issues that South Africans will also think about, is that to what extent did Didi Mabuza stay the course, or was there a form of betrayal in that struggle? And yes, some people have argued that he was never critical of the ANC, but as a concerned South African and a member of the ANC, he could not have been happy with the fact that the ANC in the last 8 years had lost 22% of the share of the vote in a very short space of time. The ANC used to be a leader of society. Today, it is becoming more like a party that is destined to the dustbin of history. So when we remember people like Didi, we must also remember the failures of the leadership that came. But what you were also saying, which was also about somebody who's quiet and formidable and dominant, is that he was not a person who will jump to the mic. He always preferred to build alliances, to work within the structures. And as I said earlier, he also grew the base for the ANC. And in a sense, the ANC of today has failed many of the people like Didi who had built on it. But he also must assume the responsibility to that, because in as much as we say all these things, there are always other concerns that have emerged or that have always been emerging associated with him. Those have to do with the issues of crime, but also the fact that he dealt harshly with those who were his detractors. And whether the history will judge him fairly on that, it's something that time will tell.
You know, Professor, our reporter, senior political reporter Samgele Maseko, was just engaging with the ANC's second deputy SG, the Nomvule Mokonyane, a short while ago. And he actually posed this question about, in his later life, did the late former deputy president actually raise some concerns about what he termed the current state of the ANC? And of course, the ANC SG emphatically refuting these claims. And I mean, you've just said something very profound, that we need to be very real in terms of how we actually describe people, even after they've passed, raising both the good and the bad, and what the proper values that they actually stood for.
Yeah, I think it's important that we must affirm the humanity of our leaders, that all of us are fallible. We do make mistakes. And we must also understand that some of the mistakes must be understood within the context of the rough and tumble of politics. Somebody like Didi would not have been expected, given where he comes from, his origin, to have risen to the level of the deputy president. And we must accept that in itself is an achievement, to rise from the backwoods of Mpumalanga to ultimately become the deputy president of the country. And also, we must also acknowledge the fact that it takes a formidable person to become a two-term premier. And you could actually say, when we talk about the post-1994 South Africa, Didi was always there. And we therefore need to acknowledge the contribution that they've made, and also maybe be forgiving of some of the mistakes that they've made, but also be frank about some of the behaviors and conduct that were not befitting to the people who fought for liberation. And in this case, the silencing of the detractors, the issue of corruption, and the failure to connect with the people. But as I indicated, that Didi seemed to have been able to to create a certain supremacy around himself when it came to Mpumalanga, that either through manipulation, through shrewd calculation and opportunism, he will be remembered to be one of the people who was very strong, one of the strong premiers that this country has actually produced.
Very honest engagement there, Professor. We appreciate your time this afternoon. That is Professor Sipho Seepe, the political analyst, also just sharing some insights and weighing in on the passing of the former Deputy President, David Mabuza.